Most teams live and breathe inside cloud tools now, from email and chat to customer records and finance systems. Those tools are built on software as a service, SaaS, and the real magic often happens when they quietly connect to each other. This insight is part of the Tuesday Insights feature from Bare Metal Cyber Magazine, and it walks through the world of SaaS to SaaS connections, the hidden integrations that move data between vendors with just a few clicks. The goal is to give you a clear mental model of what these connections are, how they work, and what healthy versus risky behavior looks like, so you can have better conversations with admins, business owners, and leadership. At the simplest level, a SaaS-to-SaaS connection is a trust relationship between two cloud applications. One app is granted permission to read, write, or manage data inside another app's tenant, often after a user clicks a Connect or Sign In With button. Technically, that permission is encoded in tokens and scopes that define what the connecting app can do over time. The important point is that once this trust is granted, the two vendors can talk directly to each other without going through your on-premises network or traditional agents. From a security perspective, that means you have a path for data and actions that may not show up in the places you are used to watching. These connections are part technology and part process. On the technology side, they are built on application programming interfaces, authorization scopes, and tokens issued by identity providers and SaaS tenants. On the process side, they depend on how your organization approves new integrations, who is allowed to grant permissions, and whether anyone regularly reviews what has already been connected. In many environments, that process is loose or entirely ad hoc. People treat new integrations as productivity shortcuts rather than as new trust boundaries that deserve the same level of attention as adding a new vendor or giving a user admin rights. SaaS-to-SaaS connections sit across several layers of your environment at once. They touch identity and access because they rely on delegated permissions tied to users or admins. They live in the data layer because they move, copy, or transform information between systems, sometimes creating new stores of sensitive data. It helps to distinguish these connections from a few things they are often confused with. They are not just users logging into SaaS apps. They are software systems accessing each other's environments on behalf of users. They are not just generic application programming interfaces. They are persistent authorizations that can last months or years if nobody revokes them. They are also not simply your identity provider, even though the identity provider may issue the tokens. The real risk lives in the trust relationship between the two vendors and the specific actions one is allowed to perform in the other's tenant. Most of these connections start from a very familiar experience. Someone working inside a primary tool sees a button that promises an easy integration. Connect your calendar, sync your contacts, or sign in with your corporate account. They click the button, land on a consent screen, and are asked to approve a list of permissions. From their point of view, it looks like a normal, low-friction workflow. Behind the scenes, one application is asking for an authorization token that will let it act inside another application's environment, with the scopes listed on that screen. Under the hood, the dominant pattern is delegated access built on standards like OAuth. The resource SaaS platform issues a long-lived refresh token and shorter-lived access tokens to the integrating app. The scopes on those tokens might be as narrow as read basic profile, or as broad as read and write all mail, or manage all files in the tenant. Because those scopes are often tied to a specific user or admin identity, the integrating app can sometimes do anything that identity can do. This is where small consent choices can turn into large trust relationships that nobody remembers in detail later. Once a connection is live, most of the activity happens quietly in the background. The integrating app may poll the primary SaaS tool on a schedule, subscribe to webhooks for certain events, or push updates whenever a user takes an action. A marketing platform might continuously pull new leads from a customer relationship management system, or a workflow tool might scan shared drives for new documents and update tasks accordingly. Logs and alerts, when they exist,
usually stay inside one or both vendors rather than flowing into your traditional security information and event management tooling. That makes it easy for significant data movement to stay off the main radar.
An end-to-end example makes this concrete. Imagine a sales operations manager connects an email sequencing tool to the corporate email platform to automate outreach. They approve a permission set that allows the sequencing tool to read mailbox contents and send email on the user's behalf. From that moment on, the sequencing tool can access message content, send messages that look like they come directly from the user, and potentially see sensitive attachments or replies. All of this takes place entirely inside cloud-to-cloud calls between vendors and never passes through your internal network in a way that traditional monitoring can easily see.
This model quietly assumes a lot of things that may not be true. It assumes that users understand the meaning of each scope on the consent screen and will think twice before approving broad access. It assumes that administrators have a process to review and clean up old or unused integrations on a regular basis. It assumes that logging for third-party access is available, turned on, and retained long enough to be useful during investigations. It also assumes that vendors handle tokens and permissions correctly. When any of these assumptions fail, a SaaS-to-SaaS connection can become a long-lived blind spot in your security model.
Once you start looking for them, these integrations show up almost everywhere. Collaboration tools connect to document storage so people can share and edit files without leaving chat. Project management platforms hook into code repositories and build pipelines so tickets can show build status and links to commits. Human resources systems talk to identity providers and payroll services to keep employee records in sync. None of this feels unusual to the people doing the work. It is just how modern teams expect their tools to behave, which makes it easy to forget that each connection is also an expansion of your attack surface. Some of the densest clusters of SaaS-to-SaaS connections sit around sales, marketing, and customer support. A typical environment might join a customer relationship management system to marketing automation, webinar tools, customer success platforms, support ticketing, and survey systems. Each integration often requests broad access to contacts, deals, and communication history because product designers want a seamless experience. Over time, that can leave you with dozens of vendors that can read or update customer data, each owned by different business units and rarely tracked in a central place.
The good news is that there are quick wins available, even for small or stretched security teams. One approachable starting point is to focus on the sign-in with and app marketplace integrations inside a few core platforms, such as email, collaboration, and file storage. Simply producing a list of which apps have been granted access, what scopes they hold, and when they were last used can reveal a surprising amount of shadow integration. Another practical step is to highlight connections with high privilege scopes, like read and write all files, manage users, or send mail as user, and either tighten or remove them based on business need. On the deeper and more strategic side, mature teams treat these connections as part of their third-party risk, identity, and data protection programs. They build or adopt tools to discover integrations across major platforms on an ongoing basis. They define policies specifying who can approve new connections, which scopes are acceptable for different types of apps, and how often existing integrations must be reviewed. They also make SaaS-to-SaaS awareness part of incident response and threat modeling, so that when a vendor is compromised or a token is abused, they think through the blast radius across connected applications, rather than focusing only on direct user accounts.
All of this effort exists because SaaS-to-SaaS connections do deliver real value. When they are used well, they reduce copy and paste work, keep data synchronized, and allow people to stay in the tools where they are most effective. They can improve data quality because information flows automatically instead of relying on manual exports and imports. For small teams in particular, integrations can feel like an extra pair of hands, quietly moving information where it needs to go so humans can focus on analysis and decisions instead of plumbing.
The trade-offs become clear as the number of integrations grows. There is a cost trade-off because some connections require higher license tiers or paid add-ons, and those costs can multiply quickly across departments. There is a complexity trade-off because each new connection adds another path for data and permissions, making it harder to reason about where information really lives and who can act on it. There is also a skills trade-off because someone needs to understand how scopes work, how to read app permission pages, and how to evaluate vendor behavior, which is not always part of traditional admin training. There are also hard limits that marketing rarely emphasizes. Many integrations are built for common, happy path scenarios and can behave poorly or silently fail when they encounter edge cases. Security features like granular scopes, audit logs for third-party access, or fine-grained approval workflows may be uneven across vendors. Some integrations assume a strong identity model and clear data classification so that read files or access contacts has well-understood meaning. In environments where those foundations are weak, SaaS to SaaS connections can spread messy access patterns and unclear ownership across more systems instead of cleaning them up.
Common failure modes tend to share a pattern of set and forget. A user or admin approves a broad integration for a short-lived project, then moves on and never revisits it, leaving a standing authorization that still has access to mailboxes, files, or sensitive customer data. In some organizations, anyone can connect anything, with no approval flow, no inventory, and no clear owner for integration risk. Over time, that culture can create an environment full of apps with powerful scopes that nobody remembers approving and nobody is actively managing.
Shallow adoption of these integrations shows up as tooling without governance. The organization relies on connected apps to keep work moving, but there is no consistent process for cataloging integrations, reviewing scopes, or responding when a vendor changes its behavior. Security and IT teams often learn about a connection only when something breaks or when a vendor appears in the news, which forces incident response to be reactive and stressful. Logs and metrics, when they exist, tend to focus on uptime and usage rather than on which third-party apps are accessing what data.
Healthy, deeper adoption looks more deliberate in day-to-day behavior. There is at least a basic catalog of integrations for major platforms, along with named owners and clear business justifications. High-privilege scopes are the exception rather than the rule, and when they exist, they are documented and tied to specific use cases. Reviews of existing integrations happen on a schedule, even if they are lightweight, and removing unused or overprivileged apps is treated as normal hygiene rather than as a crisis project. When an incident occurs, teams can pull the right logs or reports to see how third-party access played into the story.
Positive signals are often quite practical. If your admins can answer the question, which apps have access to corporate mail or files without weeks of discovery, that is a strong sign of control. When business owners understand that approving a new integration is also making a risk decision, you have a healthier foundation. When vendor assessments include questions about how the app handles tokens, audit logging, and tenant-level permissions, SaaS to SaaS risk is being treated as part of the normal conversation rather than as an afterthought. In that kind of environment, these integrations still carry risk, but they are known and managed parts of the landscape.
At its heart, SaaS-to-SaaS integration risk is about understanding and governing the trust relationships between your cloud tools, not about banning those relationships altogether. These connections sit at the intersection of identity, data, and third-party risk, turning simple convenience clicks into long-lived paths across vendors. When you can see and shape that fabric, integrations become a strategic way to extend your environment, rather than an uncontrolled sprawl of hidden highways. A useful next step is to pick a few critical SaaS platforms, look at who and what they trust, and start nudging your organization toward better habits around cataloging, pruning, and reviewing those connections over time.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.